Welcome back to Doc Morgan's Metal Reviews. I am Doc Morgan, and today I'm going to be talking about Behemoth's I Loved You at Your Darkest. I haven't done a review for a while, but unfortunately life got in the way once again. As of recording this album is about a month and a half old, but I have opinions on it and I want to keep this channel alive, so here we go. And side note, this episode can be thought of as some kind of drinking game. So go fill yourself a nice cup full of whatever your poison of choice is and take a drink every time I mention the Satanist, because I can guarantee you it's gonna happen a lot. Onwards. So quite briefly, for those of you who may not be familiar, Behemoth started off as a fairly traditional black metal band back in 1991 in Poland, with the only remaining original member today being frontman Adam Darsky, aka Nurgle as he is known to us mortals. And like a lot of black metal acts that started off in the 90s and have survived to this day, Behemoth have evolved from that classical black metal sound into something that can certainly be traced back to black metal, but is definitely unique to the band themselves. If you want examples of other bands that have done shit like this, just look at Cradle of Filth or fucking Dimmu Borgir. You know, they've all started off, if you go back and listen to their very, very, very first albums, definitely black metal. Maybe some sort of a variation, some sort of an offshoot of black metal, but definitely black metal. And listen to them today. You've got Cradle of Filth, which, although they've gone through good times, not so good times, they've come out stronger. Take a listen to Cradle of Filth's latest album, Cryptoriana. You can definitely trace the roots of that kind of music back to black metal, but it's not black metal. Take a look at Dimmu Borgir's latest album, Aeonian. You can trace it back to black metal, but today it's just absolute... well, I won't go calling names, but it's bizarre to say the least. So Behemoth's new album, I Loved You at Your Darkest, its predecessor, The Satanist, Drink, was one of the best albums I've heard in a long time, and it got them so many new fans. It sold well, and yet still somehow did this while remaining true to their sound, even developing into this more savage sound with these barreling, unrelenting blast beats and the occasional string and horn sections kicking in for a touch of grandiosity. When The Satanist came out, Drink, I didn't think it could ever be topped, and to this day my feelings haven't changed too much in that regard, even this long after the dust has settled. When it came to writing I Loved You at Your Darkest, Behemoth obviously struggled with the decision of whether or not they wanted to climb out of the comfy bed that is The Satanist and stick to what they know would be well received and possibly run the risk of making something entirely derivative, or derail themselves completely by going for something totally new. And I won't go so far as to say that I won't go so far as to claim that Nurgle and gang have just gone and redone The Satanist, Drink, but there is a clear lineage between these two records. The Satanist was such an attention-grabbing and iconic album for the band, and it's always difficult to follow up these types of albums, usually producing something to elicit the old phrase, "it's good, but it's not ... from their fans. I mean, take Metallica, for example. When Metallica came out with And Justice for All, anytime anybody talks about And Justice for All today, it's always followed by, you know, it's good, but it's not Master of Puppets, the predecessor to And Justice for All. And, you know, I think that's what Behemoth have done here. They've made their Justice for All album. I Loved You at Your Darkest is a phenomenal album, but it just isn't The Satanist. But, you know, let's actually take a look at the album itself. So, in terms of lyrics and vocals, Nurgle has decided to shock the world with this very different take on the modern political situation with Russia and Trump, and of course, I'm fucking joking, it's all criticisms and cynicisms concerning Christianity in the form of obscure biblical references and snide comparisons of Christ to Nietzsche's uber-mentioned God to, well, all sorts really. I think even a pig at one point. There's a couple of references to Aleister Crowley throughout this album, most blatantly with the song Bartzabel, which is a riff on the ritual to summon the demon Bartzabel as laid out by Aleister Crowley in the Bartzabel Working. Note of reference, Bartzabel does date back to long before Aleister Crowley. He's just been made most famous by Crowley. The only criticism I have with Nurgle is that he's doing this thing again where You know, amidst the flowery and poetic language, he calls upon references to deities and spirits from a whole host of faiths, dogmas, and legends, Mad Lib style, without rhyme or reason, in an effort to sound more, I don't know, intellectual, occult. He stays with a lot of Kabbalistic Hebrew names, a few of them made famous by Crowley in his works, but Nurgle is really happy to mention figures of Greek, ancient Greek religion and mythologies, as well as even Astarte, the Akkadian goddess of war. I feel while all these double up on the occult sounding bonus points, it dilutes from this Abrahamic central theme to drag in Prometheus and Aurora unnecessarily. This is the most minor of points I'm going to make in this review, but it is a pet peeve of mine, so I did feel it was worth mentioning. More importantly, in terms of the music, Behemoth have popped the hood on the Satanist, swapped out the engine, and given the whole thing a fucking paint job, essentially. There are one or two songs here, like Wolves of Siberia, that just feel like they may have been recorded closer to the time of the Satanist. I don't know. But Wolves of Siberia, for example, sounds like it could have been a B-side to one of the bigger singles off of the Satanist. I should really stop mentioning the Satanist. I promised myself I wouldn't do this. But while a lot of these songs have that signature barreling blast beat Behemoth sound to them, there's a lot more nuance here with I Loved You at Your Darkest, with some slower, stripped down melodies than we'd normally be accustomed to from Behemoth, no longer using the relentless blast beats as a crutch, but instead showing off a more dynamic sound. It all works for the most part here, with very little to criticize outside of the soundscape getting a little cluttered when the full range of instruments come into play. For example, there's a couple of moments throughout this album when the band is blasting along and they've got the strings and they've got the horns and there's a acoustic guitar doing some arpeggios and there's another solo going on with an electric guitar and the drums are fighting for attention, and sometimes it creates this cacophony that's more dissonant than harmonious. The only example I can think off the top of my head is the solo in Angelus 13, if you want an example of where this album just kind of comes off the rails a little bit. But listen, sometimes they sound like they're going for this epic, awesome sound and everything, and everything just ends up fighting for attention without convalescing into anything fruitful, I guess. Kind of related to that, the rot creeping into this record is this habit of all of the songs being great for the first half and then turning into these winding, meandering instrumentals for the second half, trailing off into almost nothing. The quality remains fairly consistent from beginning to end on this album. The front half is just as good as the back half. Side A, every bit as good as side B. I think the first single, God Equals Dog, while having the silliest name of any metal song I've ever heard, it's probably the best song on this album here, or at least the song to give you the best example of an overview of this album. I don't want to sound too negative. There is a lot more on this album that works than doesn't, but when all is said and done, guys, it's Behemoth. You know you're getting some bang for your buck, and I'm only pointing out the minutiae that didn't work for me. All in all, I cannot stop spinning this album. I think it's phenomenal. It's great, but it's not the Satanist. 8 out of 10.